Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Holland with the Novel Neighbor, and we have an exciting event this evening. It is National Poetry Month, so we have pulled together some of our favorite poets to talk this evening. We'll have a chance for questions at the end, but I'm going to just jump right into it and introduce who we have together this evening. So Ellen Hagan is a writer, performer, and educator. She's the recipient of the 2013 NOMA Creative Arts Grant and received grants from the Kentucky Foundation for Women and the Kentucky Governor's School for the Arts. Tonight, we are thrilled to spotlight her books, Reckless, Glorious Girl, and Blooming Fiascos. And we just found out less than a week ago that Ellen and I are from the same hometown. Well, we both know where we're from, but when getting ready for this event. And so it's been an extra treat to know that Ellen is a but also a Bardstonian, as well as a fellow Bardstown Barracuda, which is our swim team growing up, which was mentioned in her middle grade book. Also tonight, we have Aija Mayrock, who is a best-selling author, poet, and performer. She was named one of Today's Show's Heroes of the Year for 2018 and has been part of the Do Something movement to register young people to vote. Her work has been published and featured on Good Morning America, Forbes, Teen Vogue, and Refinery 29, among numerous others. We are thrilled to be featured in her book, Dear Girls. Finally, Andrea Scarpino, who used to be a Novel Neighbor employee and is a store favorite, is our fabulous moderator for the evening. Andrea has served as the Poet Laureate of Michigan's Upper Peninsula from 2015 to 2017 and is the writer of some amazing poetry collections, including Once, Then, and What the Willow Said, as well as It Fell. Welcome this evening to each of you, and we're thrilled to be participating in Poetry Month.
Thank you so much, Holland. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. It is my pleasure to serve as our moderator. So I thought we could begin hearing some poetry, obviously. So we're going to have Ellen share maybe 5 minutes or so of her poems. Aija will do the same. And then I've got some questions for our fabulous readers. But if you start having some questions or things you'd like to talk about, please just submit them to YouTube or Facebook, whatever you are watching through, and we will try to get as many as we can. So Ellen, why don't you start with some poetry?
Sure. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here with you all tonight. I'm going to read a couple poems from Reckless, Glorious Girl. It's about 7th grade Beatrice Miller, who lives with her mom and her grandma, who she calls Mema. And she's trying to figure out who she is and how to show up in the world, and also how to be cool. This is called Beatrice Miller's Burning Questions. Will Mom and Mema ever see me as more than a little kid? Will they ever trust me, recognize my growing, see my evolution, witness my expansion? I've been studying other words for mature in our big old thesaurus, and they include evolve, develop, blossom, ripen, arrive. So my question is, will those words ever happen to me? How can I celebrate all the parts of me? Comic book nerd, garden and movie lover, bike rider, swim teamer, nacho eater, Mema and mom hugger, late night couch cuddler. Should I shine a light on all the parts of me that no one can see? Nervous, anxious, embarrassed, awkward. Maybe if I could share those feelings, then people would see more of the real me. And then, will Mariella, Stacy Ann, and I ever be officially cool? Not outskirts, outside, sideline cool, but ruling the school, making all the jokes, getting all the laughs, full lunch table, friends finding us after the bell rings. You know, that kind of cool, the kind that's smooth, enters the room before you do. Anyway, I've got about 1 trillion more, but you have to start somewhere. Beatrice. Maybe my parents could have chosen a name not like a granny. Less grandma, more teenage. Less arthritic, more athletic. Less geriatric, more youngish. Less old folks home, more spring break. Less ancient, more modern. You get the idea. The fact that it really is my Mema's name doesn't make it any better. Fact is, it makes it worse. Because I love my Mema more than the ocean or French toast or sleeping in or bacon. And when I don't spend all my time hating it, my name becomes a beacon, some light to hang on to when it's too dark to see myself. And I'm going to read just two short poems from Blooming Fiascos, which also came out this year. It's a collection of poems. And I will read a poem for my real memoir, Miriam Dawson Hagan. You skillet sizzler woman, grease-eyed pop and hot, you stove chanter, apron wearer, cornbread slayer, knife wielder, waist shaker, you witchy kitchen woman of coven and craft, you palm swatter, shift slinger, corn boiler, late stayer, crossword doer, milk drinker, country fied, sweet spot haver, arms plenty hand wringer, you stuffing wizard, veggie chopper, spin winner, potato skinner, lard user, slim sister, oven runner. You spatula wielder, casserole baker, butter to his bread. You tall tale teller, turkey dresser, sous chef shit talker. You exalted sweet tea mixer, fried egg wonder, majestic mama to 9 bodies. You grand grander, show stunner. All the time, I miss you. And I'll close with a poem that was originally written about global warming, and it feels like a poem that's written for these times and in thinking about when post-pandemic, hopeful. What warms you most? When I stay up past midnight, reading about the globe and its hotness, I do not weep or bellow into the polluted night sky. But do I breathe in that glorious exhaust? Yes. Do I sleep huddled in a kind of terrific fear? Sure. Do I wake again in the morning all the time before the alarm now, every day, ready, 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 ready? My anxiety close and comfortable. I do say yes. I do not pray, but I do wear a Masonite around my neck like some prayer or luck, a locket. I do not scare easily, and so I barrel through, ride the train into the nightmare I keep on reading about. Hug the people I love most. Open my home, invite everyone over. Wine and chocolate, and will you sit a spell? And will you dance until you sweat through your underwear? And will you kiss the base of my throat until it opens? A splay of wings riding the shotgun of my love. I will love, 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 love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. That was a glorious beginning. Aija, could we hear some of your poetry?
Sure, and thank you so much, Ellen. That was so beautiful. Wow, that was amazing. So I'm going to read a poem from my book, Dear Girl, and this poem is called Dear Girl, and it's what inspired the book, or it's one of the poems that inspired the book. Dear Girl, oftentimes we women start to rise, and then certain people devise a plan to disenfranchise. Whether it's our bodies or rights, entice us with movements, unite us through persecution. Dear girl, open your eyes. We have come so far, it's easy to resign. We've got equality, but public policy shows the contrary. Honestly, 1 in 6 women could be raped in their lives, and it's mostly seen as a victimless crime. What should every girl know? You are not some puppet in a puppet show. Expose the double standards, the hypocrisy, the hate. It is never too late. This is the moment of girls taking the reins. It is time's up. It is me too. It is everyone from me to you who has spoken or stayed silent but strong. And for every survivor who speaks only to be met with intimidation, investigation, and disbelief. Dear girl, you will be believed. If not by Senate floors and investigators, we will hear you, dear girl. We will see you, dear girl. We will stand by you. For the survivor 3,000 miles away or the one next door, you are heard. Justice will not always prevail, but we will continue to fight tooth and nail. You are heard so that our sisters and daughters will never be asked, rather harassed, whether they wanted it, regretted it, or just forgot. Believe me, no one forgot. Dear everyone, grab a hold of your voice. It is time to make a choice, to believe survivors, to pay us all the same, to give women of color equal access and opportunity, to protect the safety of trans girls every day. Make the choice to change the climate. Make the choice to not stay silent. This is not the era of girls. This is the future of girls. Thank you. So I'll read one more shorter one that is very different in subject matter, if I can find it. All right, I think I have it by memory because I don't know which page it's on. This one is called Wounds Like Crown Jewels. So the poem talks about a journey from girlhood to young womanhood and all different things that many people experience. And so this is about mental health and wearing your vulnerability as if it is crown jewels. Growing up, the world taught me that vulnerability should be a secret. I grew up believing that the hero of a story never showed signs of weakness. I disguised my demons so there would be no sign of struggle. My vulnerability is not my weakness. It is my superpower. I wear it like a cape and watch mouths gape at the sight of a warrior wearing wounds like crown jewels. My vulnerability is more powerful than wielding a sword or a shield. No one teaches us that resilience rises like a wildfire from pain. The battles you fight do not take away from who you are. Dare to teach the world that weakness doesn't exist. Weakness is just a seed that no one sees sprouting into genius. Own your story like you wrote it by yourself. You are the hero. The hero is imperfect. Wear those wounds like crown jewels. Thank you.
Wonderful. Fabulous. Fabulous. Well, I wanted to start by asking you both to talk a little bit about the importance of writing about girls and women and girl bodies. And both of your work, I think, talk about multi-generational female relationships and the importance of that. And both of your poetry bodies, I think, have so much to say about women's bodies. And I would just love to hear you talk a little bit about why you both find it so important to write about many women's experiences or the female experiences in our time in 2021.
I could start. I would say, yeah, I love that question. And Aija, I love your poems too. It feels like, I'm always trying to think about how do you craft whole and nuanced women that are complicated, that make mistakes, that can be, like the title of Reckless Glorious Girl. I feel like I definitely, people thought I was reckless growing up. I don't know that anybody called me glorious. I've sort of tried to imagine that for myself, but I made a lot of mistakes, and I was sort of struggling through figuring out what my identity was. I was always a little bit figuring out, how do I get comfortable in my skin? My mom, she would always tell me, I inherited my nose, which my nose felt like it was this shape when I was 8 years old. I arrived with this nose, and my mom would say, you inherited it from your grandfather. It's a strong Middle Eastern nose. And I remember being like, I don't want this part of my identity or this part of my ancestry. It made me feel like, not, my idea of beautiful. I was struggling with that. And I remember it was also, people pointed it out, or it would be something that would be a marker for me. And I remember my mom, finally, as I got older and I learned to also figure out how to love. And I'm also, that's a journey, a forever journey for me. But figuring out how to love where you come from, how to love your ancestors, how to love the complicated and the not quite, what these stereotypes of beauty are that the media has put out there, and that all, everything is put out there, to sort of to be able to rage against that and to push back against it and think of all the different types of beauty, and beauty in aging, and beauty in different bodies, and what bodies can do and exist, and that they can be powerful and not just there as something for other people to gaze at, but it's something that I own, and I can embody my physicality, the way I exist in the world. So it's a long answer to say, I want there to be women who can rage and be sad and be full of joy. I want them to have all of their complications and to show up as real people and not be stereotypes, Yeah.
I love everything that you just said, and I so agree with that. And I think for me, a lot of when I began writing poetry, I wrote it, I think, as a way to work through different things that I was going through, like so many writers and poets do. And then the more that I wrote poetry around girls and women, I think that part of it was I was searching for the things that I had never heard, or the things that I had been seeking. And I think one of the last pages in my book is for those, I'm going to get this right, I don't want to mess it up. It's been a while since I read this. For those who came here seeking, I hope you found what you were looking for. And I think that a big part of my own journey with writing was that seeking for the messages and the words that I had been searching for my whole life, or the stories that I'd been searching for. And so I wanted to create poetry that would speak to that, especially when it came to girls and women, because I think there often are not enough messages, or messages that could be improved in order to just cultivate a world that is better and kinder to girls and women.
Yeah, when you were both talking, I was actually thinking about, there's like a famous Toni Morrison quote where she talks about having to write The Bluest Eye because she couldn't find that book out in the world already. And I wonder if that resonates with you both, of kind of feeling like I'm writing books that I would have wanted to have as a young person. I mean, I know, Aija, you wrote a book about bullying. Is that part of your experience and your interest in writing as well, to be that person to have for that kid who needs it?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when I began writing my first book, The Survival Guide to Bullying, I was in high school, and I wrote it as a way to work through what I was dealing with at the time. But so much of that book was also, I wanted to write the book I never had, so that I could give it to the next generation of young people that would maybe face bullying. And I think that definitely is a huge part of my writing, whether it be fiction or nonfiction or poetry, that I want to create the thing that I had been searching for, and hopefully will make it accessible so that other people aren't searching for it when they come up and grow up in life.
Yeah, and I would say, thinking about Kentucky specifically too, I was lucky to have some mentors and teachers who starting, sort of showed me the way. I was about 17 years old when I started working with poet Kelly Norman Ellis and Crystal Wilkinson, who were Appalachian poets. So in the Appalachian region, there were poets who looked up the definition, Appalachian. It said white residents of the Appalachian Mountains. And so Frank X. Walker, Nikki Finney, there were poets who said, you know what, we poets of color exist in this region. We are here. And here's what our history is. Here's what our story is. And so they were at 17, when I was trying to figure out who I was and just the same as Beatrice, how to show up in the world. They were there as mentors, being like, oh, if you call your grandmother Mama, call her that. And if you grew up country, be country. And you could talk about the cornbread you grew up with, and you can talk about, and you can stay asking questions. I feel like they were the mentors for me to figure out, I want to do what they're doing. I want to try to write those characters into existence. So I think that sort of works in tandem too. Yeah.
I love that. I think definitely, I love that. If you call your grandma Mama, call her Mama. I think sometimes in poetry, at least my experience has been, can be kind of a desire to smooth out difference, right? Yeah. Like, let's all use the same language. Let's all reference the same poets, that kind of thing. And the poets I love the most, and I think you are both have this in your writing, have really authentic voices to themselves. They're not that smoothed out, like pretending that we're all old white men or whatever, you know? So I appreciate that authenticness in your writing. I also really appreciate that you both are performance poets as well, and obviously perform so much as you were sharing your writing. I wonder if you could talk about how it might or may not be different when you're writing something to perform versus writing something for the page. If there is a difference in your process, maybe.
Yeah, sure. I would say absolutely. You know, my undergraduate degree is in acting. I loved acting. I love performing. I love the sort of the exchange between. I so miss audiences. I mean, there's still the Zoom audience feels. There's definitely an energy there. But I think anything I'm writing, I like to read it out loud. I like to hear the music of the language. It helps me to edit and figure out, oh, does this work? Does this sound right? Does it feel? And especially when I'm working with young people, I love the sort of the call and response of it. The getting on stage and hearing their voices or seeing the reaction that people have of their, and there's some quiet performers, and I think it gives young people a chance to explore, like, what do I want my voice to do? How do I want it how do I want that exchange to happen? But definitely, even when I'm writing fiction, I'm trying to read things out loud. What does the dialogue sound like? What is the music in how the words come together? Yeah.
I always look at, for me, performing is like the reward at the end of the writing process, because I feel like every writer can relate that it can be very difficult and very frustrating. But I love performing so much, and similar to what Ellen was sharing, I miss the audiences so much. But I definitely see a difference when I write poetry that is maybe more meant for the page versus to be performed. And I think whether it's style or just the way I feel it or hear it in my body. And I think I kind of know it in the moment that I'm writing it down, whether this is something that may be best to remain on the page or something I need to speak. A lot of times when it's a spoken word or a piece that I'm going to perform, I can hear it in my head, and I can like feel it in my body, and it's almost like I need to say it as I'm writing it. But I also relate to the editing part of it, where for me to hear it is one of the best ways for me to learn how to edit the piece. And so I definitely need to say it and feel it and be in the piece as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have so many like YouTube clips of you performing. And I wonder if, I feel like it's so special that you arrived now in this moment, because that is such a great avenue for your voice. I feel like if you had arrived 50 years ago without YouTube and without this ready access to this kind of way to share poetry, we might not have heard your voice as much. So how do you use some of these technologies? Like, how do you feel that poetry fits in to social media or to, having ready access to video and audio like we do now?
I think that I always have this very strange relationship with social media, because my first book was about bullying and cyberbullying. And when I was a freshman in high school, a girl that I had never met who went to my old school dressed up as me for Halloween and posted it online. And I was faced with cyberbullying and hate comments at a level I had never seen before. I didn't have a social media following. I was just a student. All my accounts were private. And from that point forward, I was very afraid of social media. And if you had told me at that age that I would ever make a career on it, I would have been like, there is no way that will ever happen. And to this day, I struggle with social media because I would not be where I am without it. I am very grateful to it. But at the same time, I think that it is a double-edged sword for me personally. I have to take time away from it a lot. Not that it is just for me personally so bad with the bullying aspect, but just that I think that it can impact people's mental health in a lot of different ways and at varying degrees. And I see that within myself. But at the same time, I had social media. I had Instagram for years before I posted my poetry. And it wasn't until I posted this one 45-second clip, and I'll never forget it, of a live performance I had done like a year before. And that clip went viral. And I gained like 50 or 60,000 followers in 24 hours. And from that point forward, I have tried to adapt and use everything from TikTok to YouTube to Instagram. My biggest followings are on Instagram and TikTok. TikTok has been really interesting in the poetry space. I've been putting a lot more focus into that recently. And I find that you can reach a really amazing audience. And a lot of people aren't doing poetry on TikTok yet. So there's so much opportunity, and the algorithm on TikTok is unbelievable. Like anyone can really blow up on there. So I think that there's a lot of benefits to it. I also think there's a lot of negatives to social media, and sharing your art and your baby on it, because people can be very cruel. So I think it's a personal decision, and definitely set those boundaries for yourself.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you talk about this because I'm 42, so I grew up in the 90s, and there was no, like, we had disposable cameras. Like we didn't have phones, we didn't have, I mean, that is very much dating me, but it was interesting because I didn't get an email account even until I was a senior in high school. So even there was such a divide. And so even as an older poet, like I'm always watching also, and sort of the back and forth with students who also are so savvy. I have some high school students where I'm like, okay, just show me everything. Or coworkers who are about a decade younger who know everything too. I'm like, I'm just gonna sit next to, like, the tech support. Let me just sit next to, and they did their relationship to, and also my children who are like 10 and 7, who are just different, the ways they interact with technology, that I feel like I so appreciate. I'm watching though. It's a nice divide to be like, okay, I'm not so good at this, but I can watch. And even as you were saying that, Aija, it's figuring out, like, how do you make your work accessible to people? And so there's a lot, is like, there's growing pains. There's things, that I'm figuring out, that the students I work with are figuring out. It's like, how do you want to share your work? And like you said, how do you want to share something that's precious to you? Do you want to share it right away? I have very little patience. So sometimes I'm like, let's just put it out there. Let's just get it out there. And then some things as I've gotten older, I've also gotten a little more, okay, I need to wait on this one. This one maybe needs a little more time. But I so appreciate all those different ways to try and remain nimble in a world, in a sort of a changing world as you share your art. Like, how do you be flexible and be able to share in all those different spaces too?
Absolutely. And when you were speaking about that, I just thought of how when TikTok started blowing up during the pandemic, I did not want to join TikTok. I was like, I am done. Like, I have Instagram. I don't need to be on another platform. And then I was talking to some friends, and they were like, you know what? I think that if you just repurpose your Instagram or your YouTube content on TikTok, see what happens, because it's a really interesting platform. And I started doing it, and I started seeing that it was so much easier for videos, whether it was like reading from a book or like performance, to be circulated, to go viral, to get a lot of views. And even I could see more people buying my book through TikTok. And it was a wake-up call for me, because I was very against it. And it was me being more flexible and more willing to, do something that I maybe didn't want to dedicate the time to, but finding ways to do it in a way that was cautious and not, rushing into something, or even repurposing my own content to try to stay with the times. And it's worked really well, but it's a challenging thing, because there's always new platforms and new ways to get the word out. And it's like, what do you trust, your art with and your time with, and what is worth it to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I love the poem that you shared, Aija, that had vulnerability at its heart, I think. I think that is also an issue with social media, as you say, putting yourself out there and being vulnerable in that space, and then knowing sometimes people on the internet aren't very nice.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear some more poems from you two, both. I personally, Ellen, one of my favorite poems in Blooming Fiasco was Gates Open. I don't know if you feel like sharing it, but that was one of my favorites. So if you want to read that or share another one, I would love to hear more. And Aija, I have to say one of my favorites, Dear Girl, is the truth about being a girl. But again, you don't have to be kind to me. No, I'm just kidding. You can share whatever you want to share, but that was one of my favorites. I would love to hear a few more of both of your poems.
Do you want to go first, Aija?
Whatever you prefer.
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll do the truth about being a girl. All right. So actually, this was the first poem I wrote that began my journey writing about girls, I guess publicly. So I had written poetry for myself about, girls and women, but this was the first one that I wrote and I released it publicly. I wrote this one in 10 minutes. It was a word vomit. I'm sure every writer and poet can relate that there are just those times where you hit that wave and it happens. And then there are other times where you spend months or years on something and it, finally comes together or doesn't. But this one came together pretty quickly. People always say that the girls of this generation are so vain. Why can't they put their brains towards books instead of good looks? I used to blame girls too. Be more than a perfect body with a pretty hairdo. And then I stepped out into the world and I opened my eyes to the truth about being a girl. I heard guys say things like, dude, she was 10 times tighter than that girl you hit and quit Ray, or I want to pipe your sister someday, or her ass looks like a racetrack with those stretch marks, but at least it's big like Kim K's. I never grew up thinking of those things. Don't blame me. But when I thought about boys, I thought about dinner dates and soulmates, not fuckboys that look at you like shark bait. It breaks my heart for every girl growing up in this world. Instead of, how was your day messages, we get, you up, want to come fuck? I am not an object. I have a voice and something to say. Do not assume that I belong in your bedroom. I belong in a conference room. And for anyone who thinks that this generation is so vain, it's because us girls are held under a microscope day to day. It's like beautiful doesn't even exist unless you can cross everything off the checklist. Big butt, big boobs, skinny waist, includes small nose, plump lips, bony hips, hairless, careless, but still has an awareness. In all fairness, I want to be seen as beautiful too. I don't want to be demeaned. I am not the same girl I was at 15. I am stuck in between being a girl and a woman, growing up in a world that has taught me to look sexy, get a degree, maybe a little rhinoplasty, but never disagree with misogyny. A world that has taught me that being a woman means living in fear that your basic health care will disappear, or that your paycheck might somehow be smaller than a man that does the same job, or that your boss will tell you to stop giving him eyes. If you want a raise, you gotta compromise. Show me what lies above those thighs. Boy, please. The moment you misidentified everything, you forgot that 100 years ago, I could not vote. Look at what happens when you try to demote the very bodies that give birth to you, please. We are used to it all and we are appalled, but you see, we don't know what it's like to be free. Equality is not just about calling someone out. Equality is accountability. It is my brother knowing that I am equal to him. So equality is education, from classrooms to courtrooms to conference rooms and computer screens. Equality is truth, is strong voices. It is breaking through the silence that exists, because silence can't exist if it's not tolerated. Equality is you. Changing the future, clearing the path for every woman and every man. It is raising the next generation to know that not only does their voice matter, but it will be heard. We have the power in our hands, and we will not sit back and nod and smile while certain people reconcile the rules to being fertile. Sorry, but it's my body, baby. I may be a young lady, but my dad always taught me to speak out and fight against injustice of every kind. We will not stop until we hold our rights for women of every color, size, shape, sexual identity, and place in this world. And that is the truth about being a girl.
Oh my gosh, what an honor. Thank you so much for reading that. That was a joy to have performed live. So thank you.
That was awesome. And Aija, I was on your Instagram page looking at your poems, and there was one about be careful what you tell your daughters. And I loved that too. And this felt like I was like, I want to share both of these with them.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. I'll share these two right next to each other. So I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and so many of my poems, they show up in a lot of the poems, and I'll read these right next to each other. This one is called To 3:47 a.m. When Your Youngest Throws Up in Her Bed. By God, you think, and plunge your hands towards her sheets while your husband whispers, why would you touch it? Footsie, pajama-bodied shiver, she plunges her all at you. You hold the vomit towards God, the capital one this time, and curse, fuck, and loud, God damn it. And your oldest peeks awake, says, can we wake now? How's about a movie? How's about we hold here on the rug, cuddle close, because it's 3:52 a.m. now, and the cold's keeping outside, and the hot water's running, and every need of every want keeps on getting met. My God, thank the bodies and the way they dispel. Thank the expanding of each lung and how we all sometimes heave towards daylight. Thank daylight too, and electricity, and the astounding capacity of luck that leaves you weeping into morning. And this poem is called Gates Open. When an infant emerges, womb to world, soft and susceptible, their gums enter packed to the gills. Molars and molars, canines and lateral and central incisors, they arrive primed to rip and gnaw, their mouths full for the blooming, enamel encapsulating, calcium and phosphate, pulp and dentin, cementum and membrane, all blood supply and nerve, tissue alight and alive inside their small, cavernous maws. So when my youngest loses her first tooth, pulls it up, a bouquet of blood floods her lips, a crooked red smile. How adult she suddenly is, flush and gaping, an atrium inside of her. I feel teenaged, she says, my own jaw aching, a tender trench inside of me, as I watch her shed and slip from one whole body into another. Thank you.
Also, such a pleasure to hear that in your own voice. So thank you so much for doing that, both of you. Well, I would love to know, since it is National Poetry Month this month, I would love to know what you all are doing to celebrate. If there are any things that you do, any poets that you would love to shout out that you're reading right now. Yeah, anything that you find a special way to celebrate poetry.
Oh, sure. For Poetry Month, I have been trying to write poetry every day because I write morning pages every morning, but I don't necessarily write poetry every day. And so I've been really trying to get into that habit. And then when I look back, I'm like, oh, I have more poetry in stock than I thought. So that's been really nice. For poets, actually, I posted something on my Instagram where I asked people that followed me to share their favorite poets and poetry books. And so I've been trying to compile this running list of people to check out, whether they've published a book before or not, and just share their work on their Instagram. And that's been really cool. So if either of you have a favorite poet or poetry book that you've been reading, I would love to hear that, because that's been a really fun discovery to have.
Yeah, it feels like a sort of a magical, the idea that a whole month dedicated to poetry feels, I do feel the energy of all the poets that I know and the poets in the sort of the social media spaces. I am a part of a group called Elma's Heart Circle that was founded by Cheryl Boyce Taylor, who is a brilliant, beautiful, beautiful poet who has the group named after her mother, who was her grandmother, who was a poet as well. And there's about 9 of us right now. It fluctuates between about 9 and 10 or so poets. And we have, for the last 6 years, I've been part of them. We write to each other. So all of us write a poem a day in April, send it to each other. You have to it has to be in by midnight. There's a few different rules. You can miss a day, but the people who are, the people in the group, I'm like, I don't want to miss a day. And I don't want to just send a haiku every day or a small, tiny, you have to kind of come with some energy for that. So I am so thankful for them and that space. I have been writing on my blog. I've done a couple of a prompt a day on my website. I'm trying to put some excerpts on there. Some poets that I love. A close friend of mine and somebody who I just think is doing such amazing things with words is Adelphi University, who's just a phenomenal poet. I think of Renee Watson, Elizabeth Acevedo, who are in the YA world, but who also poets straddle that poetry. So those folks come up for me. But there's so many people who I go back to a lot. Yesenia Montilla is somebody I sort of, people I have next to me, I have books that I end up being like, I got to go back to this. I was teaching from a book, Vessel by Parnisha Jones, who's my editor at Northwestern. And the way she writes about food and family. And so I think often about poems that I want to teach to young people too, or which poets do I want to introduce to kids who are like, oh, I've never heard of that poet. That's why, Aija, I love that idea of tell me your favorite books, because I'm going to write them down. I want that list. I love that. Yeah.
I was going to say, could we have that list? Are you posting it to Instagram?
Yeah, it's actually in the comment section of one of my posts, but I'll post it and I'll also send it to both of you just individually. Another thing I did last year that I'll share with you that was really cool is for Women's History Month. I posted a poet throughout history around the world that was a lot of famous ones, but a lot of people that were kind of more or less unsung heroes, in my opinion. And I discovered some incredible poets. And so I'll share that with you as well, because it was really, really cool. And a lot of people I had never learned about in school from all periods of history, from so many countries around the world.
That's neat. I did my PhD work in England, and I felt like even though we speak the same language, there were all of these poets I had never heard of, right? It wasn't even a translation issue. Even buying some of their books in the US was so hard. It's an interesting thing that we're so kind of myopic in the US sometimes with our reading, that we have global poets doing amazing, wonderful things, and we don't read their work, or we don't have access to it in the same way.
Yeah, there's Nicole Seeley. I don't know if y'all know the poet Nicole Seeley, who's amazing as well, but you read 30 books of poetry in August. It's you're sort of like the summer. I feel like that could maybe happen. So she does it. It's like the Seeley challenge, I think. But it's a good way also to be like, okay, what's everybody reading? Let me write this down, or to get a stack ready. I don't generally get all 30 in, but sometimes I read 5 or 6. And that the reading of the poetry, I feel like, informs so much of what I do. Reading of anything. But I think, Andrea, when you said it, it's like there's so much stuff I haven't read. So then I'm like, I want to make sure I get this too. Read as wide as possible.
Yeah. That's so cool. I want to check that out. That sounds
yeah. That's a good one. It's a good challenge. I like that. I like a good challenge.
Yeah.
It's good to be like, okay, what do I need to, work toward? Yeah.
Well, speaking of a good challenge, you both have books coming out in a pandemic, or that have come out in a pandemic. How does that feel? I mean, how are you supporting the books? How are you sharing them with others? Obviously, the traditional book tour situation is not quite as possible now as it would have been if we weren't in a pandemic. So how are you getting your word out there?
Yeah, I think everything is sort of, a lot of things have there have been Zoom book parties. We had a really, what felt like a family and friend reunion for the books that felt like, let me just get together with my people, my friends, the artists that I love. I've been in conversation with some people, an event like this that feels special to figure out, okay, who are new people in this world that I want to get to know and share work with, and then sharing with in classroom visits. I do love working with, especially middle school and high school. I've done several sort of school visits. That feels like a fun, it feels like a way to carry on the work and to not like, it's sharing the poems, but also doing, writing activities with the students and hearing what they're saying. So I think, I'm trying to write some essays that also sort of go back to, tie back into the poetry and the books. But I feel like it's all in hopes of, how do you connect with people? How do you get people interested in wanting to buy and read the book? And what does that exchange look like? Exchange with other artists, reading what they're reading, or reading their books. I feel like that's what I'm also, when I think about what does it mean to be an artist? What does it mean to be in community? So how do I stay in and be in community as much as possible? Whether that's going to other events, hopefully people come to our events. I think that's what because it's hard. It's a pandemic. It's not like taking the book around, and being able to sign and hand it off. It's different. So I feel like trying to still find that thread and still remember why the importance of art and that that emotional and energetic connection with community.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that I think when my book first came out in this period of time, I felt like it didn't even come out just because that connection wasn't there. But I've been doing as many virtual speaking things as I can with schools, public libraries, like anything. And then sharing a lot, just using the power of social media as much as I can. I've been doing some giveaways of my book, which has been really, really nice. And then just sharing more poetry videos and more written poetry on social media. And then another thing that's kind of unrelated, but I think has really helped, is writing new material and new forms of writing. So I wrote 2 scripts, and that was really fun and made me dream about things down the line. And then that dreaming kind of reinvigorated and re-energized me trying to share the book with people in this period of time, even though that connection isn't always there. So that's been really cool too, to try to play with new forms and new stories.
I love that, because sometimes, books take such a long time to come out.
Yeah.
So by the time they come out, there's some new stuff that you want to share. So I think that's always an interesting moment where you're like, oh, that's some new things. We could try that. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, we just have a few more minutes, but I would love to hear both of your voices again. So if you would finish us out with a couple more poems, that would be an absolute delight.
Yes, let me see. I think I have one about Kentucky. I could read a quick one about Kentucky.
So you'll have Holland like swooning in the background, just so you know.
Okay. This is called What Other People See versus What I See. To other people, Kentucky equals country, equals hillbilly, backwoods, uneducated, misunderstood. But to me, Kentucky equals home, equals family, a garden in bloom, everyone who matters, my whole life story. They see empty roads where I see rolling hills. They see small towns where I see everyone I know and who knows me too. They see small minds where I see big old hearts and brilliance. On the news, I hear poverty and underprivileged. But in my home, I see a table full of fresh food from our garden and beds made with quilts from my great-great-granny's 2 hands. To me, a Kentucky sky is full of stars and shine, smells of woods and fresh earth. Thankful the people who have raised me up have taught me to love where I'm from.
Wow. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow. You're so talented. Oh my God. This is amazing. This is like really making me feel so inspired, this whole conversation. I feel so lucky to be part of this. I think that the poem I'll share it's not in my book, but it's I was going to put it in my book, but I didn't. But it's called Dear Me. I wrote it as a part of this like 5-part series around different poetry around mental health for Mental Health Awareness Month. I don't think it was not last year, the year before. And I wrote this as sort of like a letter to myself. Dear me, I used to beat you up because I believed that if I was the meanest I could be to me, no one else could hurt me. I called that strength, but really it was fear. I couldn't stop hearing the words my bullies used to call me. I couldn't stop hearing them because I believed them. And so I took on that role, the biggest bully I could be, but to myself. I didn't realize I hold the key to that level of cruelty. The way I speak to myself grows like a weed or a rose from the soil made of how I feel about myself. When I looked in the mirror, I used to wince, but now I wink. I would tell myself I love myself so much that I didn't need to eat that meal. It's called discipline, another word for looking in the mirror and seeing a girl that was never thin enough, that didn't deserve dessert. Insert inspirational phrase about discipline and bullshit ways to sculpt a body that's been sculpted enough. Dear me, you are enough. You have always been enough. Dear everyone, when you speak to yourself, do you talk to yourself as if you are a friend or a bully? Because when you speak to yourself as the bully, you are teaching yourself to accept cruelty. That cruelty is good and safe. You are teaching yourself that your safe place is one of pain. Be gentle with your heart. Be gentle with your body. Nothing in life is guaranteed except the guarantee that the longest relationship you will ever have is with yourself.
Yay! Beautiful.
Oh my goodness, you all. What a special, special evening. Thank you so much for sharing your words. Yeah, especially coming after Women's History Month. I feel like this was a perfect evening. So thank you so much, both of you, Aija and Ellen. Thank you to our audiences on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for being here tonight. Please support Ellen and Aija by buying their books. You can buy them from the novel Neighbor. It's really important to support local independent bookstores, especially in this pandemic. So please, if you are from out of town, support your local independent bookstore and support some fabulous poets. Thank you for being here tonight, everyone, and please join us again soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Whoop.